Okay, imagine this for a second. Someone tells you, completely serious, that to have a truly complete life, a successful life, maybe even a good life,
Yeah.
you absolutely must be rich.
Yeah. Not just, comfortable, but
Mm.
actually wealthy.
It's a pretty startling idea, isn't it? Especially when we usually hear things like, money isn't everything or simplicity is a virtue.
Right, or that wealth can be corrupting. It immediately throws a wrench into so many of our basic assumptions about money and, well, what a good life even looks like.
Exactly. So today we're plunging headfirst into a really radical philosophy, one that doesn't just challenge but totally tries to reconfigure how we think about prosperity.
We're looking at this perspective that argues wealth isn't just nice to have, it's actually essential, an essential prerequisite for human flourishing.
And get this, the desire for riches. It's supposedly praiseworthy.
Praiseworthy, and maybe the most controversial bit, and maybe even a
A
duty.
duty, okay. That's
Right.
a lot. So our deep dive today is into these incredibly bold claims. Where are they coming from?
They're primarily drawn from a really foundational text in the whole personal development world. It's called The Science of Getting Rich.
By Wallace D. Wattles. Published. When was it?
Way back in 1910. We're really focusing on the very first chapter, which is titled, appropriately enough, The Right to Be Rich.
1910. Wow. Now, you might think, okay, old book, maybe not relevant.
Oh,
But don't let the date fool you.
not at all. Its influence has been huge, even if people don't always realize it. Sometimes it's, well, uncredited or even a bit twisted.
For example, it was the direct, acknowledged inspiration for Rhonda Byrne's The Secret. That global phenomenon.
Absolutely, which then basically launched the whole law of attraction thing into the mainstream consciousness.
And beyond that specific link, this book really laid the groundwork, the philosophical foundation, for what we now just call the abundance mindset.
Right, that idea is everywhere now in self-help, coaching, you name it. Wattles was talking about this stuff over a century ago.
He was genuinely ahead of his time,
Yeah.
pushing ideas that were, well, revolutionary back then.
And honestly, still pretty challenging for a lot of people today.
Like what? What were the really groundbreaking concepts?
Well, things like the power of your thoughts. The idea that your thinking actually shapes your reality.
Which sounds almost mystical for the early 20th century, right?
Totally.
Mm.
But now it's kind of a cornerstone in a lot of modern psychology and self-improvement thinking.
And another huge one, this idea about wealth itself. He didn't see it as this, fixed pie.
Right. Not some limited resource we all have to fight over.
Which was, and still is, a very common way to think about economics.
Exactly. He saw wealth as expansive, constantly available, infinitely creatable, not zero-sum at all.
That really went against the grain of a lot of the economic and social theories of his time.
Oh, completely. It was radically anti-Malthusian. While lots of theories focused on scarcity, competition.
Someone wins, someone has to lose.
Right, the zero-sum game. Waddle said, no, that's fundamentally wrong. The universe is abundant. Wealth is created from what he called formless stuff.
Formless stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not just shuffled around from an existing pile. It's generated, which is a pretty deep metaphysical claim about reality itself.
So it's not just optimism, it's a claim about how things are.
Exactly. That's what makes his science different from just, say, business tips or economics.
Okay, so if it's a science,
Mm-hmm.
that implies it's predictable. Like physics, but for getting rich.
That's precisely his angle. Deterministic. Almost like a universal law.
What are the implications of that? Viewing wealth not as luck or privilege or chance, but as a predictable outcome.
Well, it's huge. It means success isn't random. It's the result of applying specific principles consistently.
So anyone who follows the rules gets rich.
That's the implication. It shifts the responsibility entirely. It's not about external factors, the
Right.
economy, your background, fate.
It's about you, whether you understand and apply the science.
Right. So if you're not rich, in his view, it's not bad luck. It's because you haven't mastered or used the principles.
That's empowering, I guess, in one way. But also pretty confronting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially thinking about systemic issues.
Absolutely. It's a very stark view on personal agency and accountability, especially for 1910. Still challenging today.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack all of this whole philosophy.
Yeah, starting with that bombshell. You must be rich for a complete life.
Which is confronting enough,
Yeah.
but then layer on top that wanting wealth is good, it's praiseworthy.
And even a duty. It just rubs up against so many ingrained ideas about money, ambition, morality.
Our responsibilities to society, even.
Exactly. So as we dig in, we're tackling some big questions like why does he think wealth is the absolute foundation for human advancement? What does he actually mean by really rich? Because, spoiler alert, it's probably not what you think.
Okay, I'm intrigued by that part.
And crucially, for you listening, what happens if you don't follow this science? Is there a downside? He talks about the sin of contentment.
Sin of contentment. Wow. All
Okay,
right.
so it's going to be a real exploration, hopefully prompting all of us, you included, to maybe rethink our relationship with resources, with potential.
And what fulfillment really means.
Yeah.
It sounds less like stock tips.
Oh, definitely not stock tips.
They're much more like a fundamental philosophy of life.
That's exactly it.
All right, let's start with that first big claim. Wealth is non-negotiable for a complete life. Beyond the initial shock, what did Wattles actually mean by a complete life? And why was wealth the absolute key?
Well, the quote itself, right from the text, is just incredibly blunt. He says, "Whatever may be said in praise of poverty, the fact remains that it is not possible to live a really complete or successful life unless one is rich."
No mincing words there.
None at all. It's
Yeah.
a declaration, not an observation.
Yeah, it sounds so harsh, like a judgment. Is he saying poor people can't be good or happy or achieve things? That feels wrong, uncharitable.
And that's the immediate reaction, right? But it's really important to clarify, he's not making a moral judgment about people's character or worth.
Okay.
He's not saying someone in poverty can't be kind or smart or find joy. His perspective is purely practical, almost utilitarian.
Practical how?
His argument is that for full personal growth, to really, as he puts it, unfold your soul and develop your unique talents to their absolute maximum ethemic, you need things. You need many things to use.
Many things to use. Okay, so not just hoarding stuff. What kind of things? Are we talking luxury goods?
It's much broader than that. It's not about materialism for its own sake. In our world, these things are resources.
Like what?
Like access to good education, specialized tools for whatever your craft or passion is, experiences like travel that, really broaden your horizons.
Okay.
Even just the mental space, freedom from that constant grinding worry, the time to actually think, create, rest, innovate.
Right, a headspace.
All these things, these enablers of growth and expression, they almost always require money to get financial resources.
I see. So it's not about being a bad person if you're poor. It's about the practical limits poverty puts on your ability to develop.
Exactly. It's about access. Access to the resources that genuinely fuel deep personal growth. Our society is just structured that way. Potential often stays locked without money.
It makes me think of that example you mentioned before, the concert pianist.
Right. Talent isn't enough. You need the instrument. You need lessons, often really expensive ones.
Years of practice time, maybe travel for master classes, performance opportunities.
None of it's free. In fact, it can be incredibly costly.
So Wattles' point is the foundation for anyone's advancement has to be understanding how to get wealth.
Yes, because without the practical means to get those things to use, your potential, in a very real way, just stays potential. It doesn't get realized.
It's a very pragmatic, almost stark view of how the world works.
Stripped of sentimentality, yeah. He's basically saying your abilities are like seeds. Wealth is the soil, the water, the sunlight they need to actually grow into something real.
That makes a kind of tough practical sense. Bringing your best self into the world takes resources. And when he talks about being really rich, clearly he doesn't just mean having enough to scrape by.
No, not at all. Or even just being financially secure. He really pushes back against just being content.
He's not a fan of just enough.
Definitely not. He says true riches mean having all that one wants for the living, of all the life one is capable of living.
All the life one is capable of living?
Wow, and he doubles down. To be really rich does not mean to be satisfied or contented with a little. No man ought to be satisfied with a little if he is capable of using and enjoying more.
That directly challenges that whole virtue of modesty, doesn't it?
Head on. And that phrase, all the life one is capable of living, that's such a high bar.
It's not just about paying bills or a nice vacation. It's like
Whoa.
unleashing every single talent, every capability you possess, fully.
Yeah. It fundamentally reframes wealth. It's not about stuff anymore. It's a measure of self-actualization, fulfillment.
A measure of how much of your potential you've actually brought into reality.
Exactly. Think about it. If you have the mind of a brilliant scientist but can't get into a lab,
Or get funding.
or even just have the time free from other pressures to really think and explore, then that potential just sits there, dormant, unexpressed.
Or like a community leader with amazing ideas, but no money to start projects or travel to learn or hire help.
Right. Waddles would say, no man who has not plenty of money can have all he wants to fully express that potential. He means tangible, material resources that enable that full spectrum life.
Removing the barriers so your highest self can actually show up in the world, whatever that looks like for you.
It's about being able to chase down every possibility within you, liberating your gifts.
Okay, bringing your most capable self into reality needs resources. I'm tracking with that. But then comes the part that really makes you pause. He says being content with less than you're capable of is sinful.
Yes.
Right.
Sinful, that's the word.
That's a heavy word, especially for contentment. Isn't contentment usually seen as a good thing? Simplicity, modesty.
It goes against so much wisdom, traditional and otherwise. But the reason he uses such a strong, almost religious term
Yeah.
is because, from his viewpoint, being content with less means you are actively choosing to hold back your own growth.
You're failing to express your full potential.
Exactly. And for him, that goes against the very purpose of nature or the universe, whatever you want to call it, which he sees as being all about the constant advancement and unfoldment of life.
So life itself wants to expand, to express more, become more. That's the core idea.
That's his fundamental premise, yeah. So to deliberately choose limitation when expansion is possible, to settle for less than you could be.
You're resisting the natural flow of existence.
That's how he sees it. It's not a judgment on your character like you're a bad person. It's a judgment on the act of self-limitation. He sees it as deviating from the universe's plan for growth.
It's a very cosmic perspective on personal responsibility then.
It really is. You're part of this larger unfolding process. So to stunt your own growth is, in a way, to work against that larger natural drive for expansion.
Okay, so if full potential requires wealth, and resisting that potential, or being content with less, is sinful, then he makes another massive leap.
He does.
He talks about a right to be rich, an actual inalienable right like life and liberty.
Yes. That
Yeah.
feels huge, right? Especially for 1910.
Totally revolutionary. How does he even justify elevating getting rich to a fundamental human right?
It is a massive philosophical claim, and it's where he really sets himself apart. He absolutely frames it as an inalienable right up there with the big ones.
How?
He connects it directly to the right to life, not just existing, but living fully. So the right to be rich means the freedom to use all things necessary for complete mental, spiritual, and physical unfoldment.
Ah, okay. So if you don't have the means for that full unfoldment.
Then your right to a truly complete life, to experience every part of yourself, is effectively denied. It's a very foundational, almost pragmatic argument for prosperity.
An inalienable right to be rich.
Wow.
I can see the controversy. Usually rights are about protection from things, not entitlement to things.
Right, negative versus positive rights. He's definitely arguing for a positive right to the resources needed for self-expression.
And then the really countercultural part, wanting to get rich, is actually praiseworthy. I mean, usually wanting money is seen as kind of low, right? Greedy, materialistic, root of all evil and all that. Is this just giving permission to be selfish? How does he square that?
It definitely flips the usual script. But he completely reframes why someone desires riches. He says it's not mere greed. It's not just wanting stuff for stuff's sake.
Okay, what is it then?
He sees it as the desire for a richer, fuller, and more abundant life. It's about expanding your life, your experiences, your impact, not just piling up things.
A more abundant life, not just more stuff. That feels like a crucial difference.
It really is.
So if I want wealth because I want to, say, travel and learn about other cultures, or fund a community project I care about, or have the time and freedom to write a novel.
Those desires, in his view, come from wanting a fuller, more expressed life. And he'd say, good, that's praiseworthy.
It's about wanting more life itself. Deeper, wider, more impactful, more contributory even.
Exactly. And he sees this longing not as something artificial, but as inherent in human nature, a fundamental impulse to realize what's possible within you, to move towards greater expression, greater life.
It's a basic drive.
Yes. He even goes so far as to suggest that not desiring more life or the money needed to enable it is actually abnormal.
Abnormal. So being content with your limits is unnatural, a deviation.
From his specific viewpoint, yes. It suggests a universal human push towards more.
Which leads him to say,
there is nothing wrong in wanting to get rich. Quite the opposite. It's all about life's advancement, its unfoldment.
How does he put it? Something about?
He says every man should have all that can contribute to the power, elegance, beauty, and richness of life. It's a vision of life lived at its peak, fully equipped, fully expressed.
Power, elegance, beauty, richness. That really elevates it beyond just, bank statements, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It connects seeking wealth directly to personal growth, collective improvement, a kind of aesthetic, impactful way of living, not just personal gain.
It reframes the whole conversation. It's not just what you can get. It's what you can become and what you can do.
A much richer picture of prosperity.
Okay, so let's keep building. Waddle says, for a complete life, you need full expression in body, mind, and soul. Equally important, all three.
Right. None is better than the others. True life needs all of them, unhindered.
Now, the body part seems pretty clear. Poverty obviously impacts physical well-being, lack of good food, clothing, shelter, too much hard labor, not enough rest.
Straightforward, yeah.
But how does poverty stop me living fully in my mind or my soul? Are those more internal, spiritual? We hear about brilliant thinkers or saints living simply.
That's a really fair point and a common one. And yeah, history has examples of amazing minds and souls who had very little. Waddles probably wouldn't deny that moments of insight or grace can happen anywhere.
Ouch.
But he's focused on sustained and full development over a whole life. Not just flashes of brilliance, but the consistent, unhindered growth of the whole person.
Okay, sustained full development. So for the body, like we said, poverty means stress, poor health, exhaustion.
Yeah, the sheer physical drain of constant financial struggle. It leaves almost no energy for anything beyond survival.
Hard to ponder philosophy when you're starving or exhausted.
Exactly. And for the mind, he argues it's way beyond just basic thinking. A full mental life needs consistent access to books, learning, education.
Right.
And crucially, dedicated time to actually study and absorb it all. Without constant distraction, without that gnawing money worry, time is a luxury poverty often steals.
And it's more than just books and time, isn't it? It's the whole intellectual environment.
Absolutely. Things like travel, seeing different cultures firsthand, intellectual companionship, stimulating conversations with diverse people, being surrounded by art and beauty that inspires you.
All things that generally cost money. Sometimes a lot of money.
Precisely. You can't just hop on a plane to see ancient ruins or buy every book you want or take months off for deep study if you're struggling to pay rent.
Your mental world gets kind of constricted by necessity.
Exactly. It limits that full mental unfoldment, developing your ideas to their max. You need the time, the space, the materials, the freedom from worry.
Okay, body and mind, I can see the practical links to resources, but the soul. This still feels like the biggest jump. How does material money connect to the soul, which feels so immaterial?
This is where his philosophy gets really profound and maybe the most challenging for many. It directly tackles that idea that spirituality means detachment from the material.
How? What's the core argument?
It's stunningly simple and direct. He says, love is denied expression by poverty.
Whoa, okay. Love is denied expression by poverty. How? Love feels internal, a bond. How does lack of money stop its expression?
He clarifies it. He says, man's highest happiness is found in the bestowal of benefits on those he loves.
Bestowal of benefits.
And crucially, love finds its most natural practical expression in giving. And that giving often is material.
Giving, okay, wait, so it's not just about buying yourself stuff.
Yeah.
A core part of wealth's value for him is being able to give to people you love in your community.
Yeah. Yes, that's a massive part of it. It totally reframes the purpose. It's almost altruistic.
It doesn't sound selfish at all, framed that way.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's about having the means to actually show your love, your care, your generosity through tangible actions, providing real benefits.
Can you give an example?
Think of a parent. Loves their child desperately, but can't afford good health care if the child gets sick, or a quality education that could change their future, or even just simple joys like a birthday party or a trip somewhere enriching.
The agony of not being able to provide.
Yeah, that would be heartbreaking. Or think of a citizen who cares deeply about their town, sees problems, has ideas, but has zero resources to help. Can't fund a local initiative, support a struggling neighbor, invest in the community.
Can't even volunteer time if they're working 3 jobs.
Right. Their desire to contribute, to express that care for the community gets stifled.
So, if poverty leaves you with nothing to give.
Wattles argues, quite bluntly, you cannot fill your place as a husband or father, as a citizen, or as a man or woman in the fullest sense. You're limited in fulfilling those roles about connection and contribution by lack of means.
That's a really powerful, maybe often overlooked point.
It is. So wealth, in this view, is what enables that bestowal of benefits. It lets you fully live out the generous, loving, contributing part of your nature.
So wealth becomes a tool for connection, for contribution, for making love tangible and impactful, not just for personal comfort.
Exactly. It redefines philanthropy almost as a necessary outcome of real wealth.
That is a surprisingly profound twist on the usual get-rich story. It makes personal prosperity a means to a richer life, not just for you, but for everyone you connect with.
Turns self-interest inside out, in a way. He wraps it up by saying, it is in the use of material things that man finds full life for his body, develops his mind, and authentically unfolds his soul through this capacity to give.
Body, mind, and soul, all needing material things for full expression, with the soul's expression tied deeply to giving. It's holistic.
The material and spiritual are completely intertwined in his view.
Okay, so if wealth is essential for this complete life, body, mind, soul, and wanting it is good, praiseworthy even, because it helps us express ourselves, especially through giving, where does that leave us? What's the final takeaway?
Well, when you put all those radical pieces together, the necessity of wealth, the praise for desiring it, its role in giving it leads to his final, maybe most provocative statement.
Which is?
He concludes that neglecting the study of the science of getting rich is nothing less than a dereliction of duty.
Hold on. Dereliction of duty. Like, I'm failing myself, failing humanity, failing God or something if I don't learn how to get rich.
Yeah.
That sounds incredibly intense. What duty? Why frame it as such a critical obligation?
It loops right back to everything we've talked about. It ties it all together. The core belief is that your greatest service to yourself, your loved ones, humanity, maybe a higher power, is to make the most of oneself.
Make the most of oneself. Okay, that resonates. I think most people feel that urge, right? To reach our potential, contribute our gifts, live a significant life.
It feels fundamental, doesn't it? And since here's the logic again, making the most of yourself requires wealth, in his view, to develop body, mind, soul, and the capacity to give, then understanding how to get that wealth becomes a fundamental obligation, a duty. It's a duty based on maximizing your potential, expressing the life within you fully.
So it's framed not as greed, but as a prerequisite for fulfilling your purpose.
Exactly. It's recognizing that full self-expression and the ability to contribute meaningfully are tied to having the means. It's a tool for moral and spiritual fulfillment, almost.
Not the end goal, but the necessary tool.
That's it. And therefore, he says, the knowledge of how to become rich, how to master this science, is the noblest and most necessary of all studies.
Nobler than philosophy. Art. Science.
I
Seriously.
think that's audacious.
It is audacious. He's not saying those things aren't vital. Not at all.
Sure.
But his argument is that this science, the science of getting rich, is what enables the fullest expression and appreciation of all those other things.
It provides the means for them to flourish.
Right. It enables all other kinds of human flourishing. So financial literacy, or this specific approach anyway, becomes like a foundational moral imperative. You need it to unlock your potential in other areas.
So if you have the capacity to become more, live more fully, give more freely, and he argues this requires wealth, then not pursuing the knowledge to get it is neglecting a fundamental duty.
A duty to yourself,
Yeah.
and by extension, your potential impact on the world. Yes.
That is a complete 180-degree flip from how most of us think about money and purpose and responsibility.
It's a genuine paradigm shift he's proposing. Demands a serious rethink of our whole relationship with wealth and ambition, moving beyond just accumulation. Wow, okay. We have definitely covered some seriously provocative ground today, diving deep into these radical ideas from Wallace Wattles.
We really have started with that jolt. Wealth is essential for a complete life.
Moved through wanting it being praiseworthy, a natural desire.
And landed on the idea that pursuing it is actually a duty.
And that duty, crucially, isn't selfish. It's about enabling the full expression of body, mind, and soul.
Especially, and this part really hit me through that practical act of giving, the bestowal of benefits.
Yeah, that connection between personal prosperity and generosity, the well-being of others, that was surprising.
It powerfully links the two.
Oh, absolutely. It challenges so many of our ingrained beliefs.
Yeah.
Money, morality, self-interest, it's all turned on its head.
This perspective reframes wealth completely, not just stuff, not just status.
It's presented as the essential means for unfoldment, for expressing all our possibilities.
Unfoldment, that's a great word for it. Leading to that highest happiness, which he says comes from making the most of ourselves and contributing tangibly.
Through that bestowal of benefits, yeah, it moves well from just economics into existential purpose.
It really does. It flips the script on self-interest in a way that's both, confronting, but also kind of inspiring.
It suggests maximizing our own potential isn't just for us. It's for the ripple effect it creates.
Which leaves us, and leaves you, the listener, with a pretty provocative thought to maybe sit with.
Yeah.
Well, if, like Waddle suggests, desire is possibility-seeking expression, if every longing you feel for more is a sign of some potential waiting to come out,
Okay.
then what possibilities might you be holding back right now? What talents, what contributions, what forms of love or generosity might be lying dormant inside you, just waiting?
And taking Waddle's challenging ideas seriously.
Mm.
What might you need to acquire, materially or maybe knowledge-wise? What things to use or science to master might be needed to fully unleash them?
What's holding you back, perhaps, from living all the life you are capable of living?
It's definitely a lot to consider, isn't it?
It is a question that could really shift how you look at your own ambitions, your relationship with money, and what fulfillment truly means for you.
Absolutely something to mull over as you reflect on what it means for you to live a complete life. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We look forward to the next one. Imagine encountering ideas that, completely challenge what you thought you knew, not just about money, but maybe even about life itself.
Yeah, ideas that make you stop and really think.
Exactly. And today, we're embarking on a deep dive into some truly essential English vocabulary. These aren't just random words, They're the foundational language for understanding complex, often counterintuitive ideas.
Ideas you find in, let's say, more advanced writing and reading materials. Understanding these words really unlocks the meaning.
Precisely. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack each word or phrase. We'll explain its meaning, show you how it's used in a pretty provocative philosophical context from our source material.
And then give you real, relatable examples, things you can actually use to help integrate them into your own understanding and conversation.
Right. We want it to be clear, engaging, and hopefully pretty easy for intermediate learners to grasp.
And our inspiration today comes from a classic text. It offers some truly, well, the text itself calls them startling ideas right from the first chapter, which is titled The Right to Be Rich.
The right to be rich. That alone is something.
It really is. And the text posits right at the start that to have a truly complete life, you absolutely must be rich. That's quite a statement to kick things off.
It certainly is a real attention grabber, and it's going to be the central idea we use to explore today's vocabulary.
Yep, that's the plan.
Okay, so let's jump right into part one. We're confronting some initial challenges to, let's say, common wisdom, and beginning with our first powerful term.
Sounds good.
Our first key term for today is a startling idea. And startling idea, that's one that is very surprising, unusual, maybe even a bit shocking. It makes you sit up and take notice.
Right. And when our source suggests that to have a truly complete life, you absolutely must be rich. Yeah, that's described as a pretty startling idea.
Because it kind of goes against the grain, doesn't it? It immediately grabs your attention because it contradicts a lot of what many of us are taught.
Exactly. Think about it in another context. The proposal to move the company headquarters to a remote island was a startling idea for everyone. Yeah. It's designed to maybe shock you a little, make you reconsider things.
Make you reconsider your assumptions. Precisely. And speaking of assumptions, we often hear ideas about how money isn't everything, or that certain qualities are just inherently good. Which brings us to our next word, virtue. A virtue. That's a quality considered morally good or desirable.
Yeah, like the common sayings, simplicity is a virtue or patience is a virtue. These are often held up as ideals, sometimes in contrast to, say, ambition or wealth.
Right. These are qualities society often elevates. For example, patience is a virtue that serves you well in difficult situations. They carry a certain cultural weight, these words.
They definitely do. And Waddell's perspective, as we'll see, sort of challenges some of these long-held virtues. He suggests that ambition and a desire for more are not only okay, but maybe even essential.
Okay, so on the flip side of virtue, there's often this concern that wealth might lead to negative outcomes.
Yeah, the dark side, so to speak.
Which brings us to our next word, corrupting. Corrupting. It means having a negative or harmful influence, causing something or someone to become immoral or dishonest.
And the common belief, the one Waddell pushes against, is that wealth can be corrupting.
That's a really common idea, isn't it? That money changes people for the worse.
Absolutely. This word corrupting, it taps into a deep-seated fear, I think, that money and power can lead people astray. You know, some argue that excessive power can be corrupting if not handled with integrity.
But Waddell argues, or seems to argue, that wealth, when understood correctly, isn't corrupting at all. It's actually enabling.
Exactly. Which right away is a challenge.
It is. It immediately throws a significant challenge into our usual way of thinking, doesn't it? Which leads us perfectly to our next key phrase. Throws a wrench into.
A good idiom.
Yeah, it's an idiom, and it means to introduce a difficulty or problem that prevents something from continuing as planned. Like Waddell's philosophy right from the start immediately throws a wrench into so many of our basic assumptions about money.
It really does. It's like, bam, here's a problem for your neat little theory. And idioms like this, they add such vividness, don't they? Instead of just saying it causes problems, throws a wrench into, paints this really clear picture of unexpected disruption.
Like a machine grinding to a halt.
Exactly. For instance, the sudden storm threw a wrench into our plans for an outdoor picnic. It just stops things cold. It creates immediate friction with what you believed or planned.
And because it creates so much friction, because it's so disruptive, we can describe it with our next term, radical philosophy.
Radical. That's a strong word.
It is. A radical philosophy is one that involves fundamental or, extreme changes, or it goes against traditional views. Waddell's work is described as a really radical philosophy.
Yeah, and radical here isn't just about being new or different. It implies a deep shift, maybe even a jarring one, right at the very roots of an idea or a system. It's meant to shake the foundations.
So not just painting the house a different color, but rebuilding it.
Pretty much. Like, her proposal for completely restructuring the team was considered a radical philosophy by some of the more traditional managers. It signals something that wants to fundamentally rethink the status quo.
And to rethink something fundamentally, you have to do more than just adjust it slightly. You need to. Well, our next word is reconfigure.
Reconfigure.
To reconfigure something means to change its shape, its arrangement, or its structure. This philosophy totally tries to reconfigure how we think about prosperity.
It's about a complete reordering, right?
Yeah.
A fundamental change, not just a minor tweak or adjustment. Think of it like this. We had to reconfigure the office layout to accommodate the new team members.
Moving walls, not just desks.
Exactly. It's about setting things up in an entirely new way. And that's precisely what Waddell's attempts with our understanding of wealth and its purpose.
Okay, these initial words really set the stage, don't they? They show just how challenging and, radical Waddell's approach is.
Definitely flags it as something unexpected.
So now let's explore how he actually redefines a common concept like prosperity and look at the crucial vocabulary that helps us understand his reimagining of wealth. That's coming up in part 2.
Great. Let's dive in.
All right, part 2. We're really getting into Waddell's reimagining of wealth and its true purpose now. Let's start with the word prosperity.
Okay, a common enough word.
It is. Usually it just means, the state of being successful, typically by having a lot of money or resources. But our source material here describes it differently. It uses terms like human flourishing and calls it a much richer picture.
So expanding the definition.
Exactly. Waddell's aims to reconfigure how we think about prosperity, defining it as something much more than just financial success.
That's a really great point. The context here definitely deepens the meaning. It's not just about accumulating cash. It's about a more holistic well-being.
Right. Like you might say, the town experienced a period of great prosperity after the new factory opened, bringing jobs and opportunities. Here, prosperity includes the money, the jobs, but it hints at something broader, maybe a better quality of life overall.
A thriving community, not just wealthy individuals.
Good way to put it. And Waddell's takes it even a step further. He argues that wealth isn't just a component of this broader prosperity. It's actually foundational.
Foundational.
Which brings us to our next phrase, essential prerequisite. An essential prerequisite. That's something that is absolutely necessary before something else can happen or be done.
So you can't have B without A. A is the prerequisite.
Exactly. And wealth, in this view, is presented as an essential prerequisite for human flourishing.
Wow. Okay, essential prerequisite really emphasizes the non-negotiable nature of it, doesn't it? It's not just helpful, it's fundamental, a requirement.
Right. Like, consider this example. Good communication skills are an essential prerequisite for success in a leadership role. Without those skills, achieving that leadership success is much, much harder, maybe impossible.
So Waddell's is saying human flourishing is incredibly difficult, or maybe impossible, without wealth first.
That seems to be the claim, which leads us directly to the concept he links it to, human flourishing.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Well, human flourishing refers to the concept of living a truly good life. It's characterized by growth, well-being, and the optimal development of one's potential, all aspects.
So really thriving, not just surviving.
Exactly. And wealth, in Waddell's view, is that essential prerequisite for human flourishing.
It's a very holistic concept then. It goes far beyond just mere survival or even basic comfort. It implies reaching your full potential in all aspects of life, mental, spiritual, physical.
Like providing access to education and healthcare is crucial for promoting human flourishing in any society. This really expands what it means to live a good life, doesn't it?
It does. It sets a very high standard.
And this is where it gets, I think, truly provocative. Waddell says the desire for riches, for this wealth, is actually praiseworthy.
Praiseworthy, as in admirable.
Yes, deserving approval or admiration. And maybe even more controversially, he suggests it might even be a duty.
A duty, like an obligation?
Yes, duty is a moral or legal obligation, a responsibility. The combination of these words, praiseworthy and duty, with the idea of getting rich is, well, it's quite shocking for many people.
It really is, because we typically associate duty with things like, I don't know, civic responsibility or taking care of your family, not personal wealth accumulation.
Right. We say, her dedication to volunteer work is truly praiseworthy. That fits our usual understanding.
Or it's a parent's duty to provide for their children. Again, familiar territory. But Wattles merges these concepts in a really surprising way. He's suggesting that wanting to get rich isn't selfish, but could be seen as admirable and maybe even obligatory within his specific framework.
It definitely flips the script. Now, speaking of frameworks, Wattles' book itself is considered a really important text in certain circles.
Ah, yes, its influence.
Which brings us to our next phrase, foundational text, often paired with the idea of a philosophical foundation. A foundational text is a book or document that's very important, forming the basis for other works or ideas that come later.
Like the cornerstone of a building, but for ideas.
Exactly. And a philosophical foundation refers to those basic principles or ideas on which a belief system is built. Wattles' book is described as a foundational text in the whole personal development world.
Right. It apparently really laid the groundwork, the philosophical foundation for what we now just call the abundance mindset.
These terms, foundational text and philosophical foundation, they really highlight the long-term impact his ideas have had, even if people don't always realize the source.
Definitely. Think about how Aristotle's writings are considered a foundational text in Western philosophy, laying the philosophical foundation for many subsequent ideas about ethics. Wattles' work, in its own sphere, holds a similar kind of status. It influenced countless later ideas in self-help and personal development.
And that influence, as you hinted, is enormous, even if it's not always obvious or directly acknowledged.
Sometimes it flies under the radar.
Which leads us to a cluster of terms describing this subtle but powerful influence: uncredited, global phenomenon, mainstream consciousness, and laid the groundwork.
Okay, let's break those down.
So, uncredited means simply not giving credit for something. A global phenomenon is something observed or experienced worldwide, huge reach.
Like a viral trend, but maybe more substantial.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Mainstream consciousness refers to the general opinion, the awareness, or the beliefs held by the majority of people, what everyone sort of knows or thinks.
The general vibe of society on a topic.
Right. And to lay the groundwork means to do the preparatory work for something that comes later. So the text says Wattles' influence has been huge, sometimes uncredited, and he laid the groundwork that inspired things like The Secret.
Ah, The Secret, which was definitely a global phenomenon and launched the whole law of attraction thing into the mainstream consciousness.
Exactly. So you can see how those terms connect.
It's a great example. Like, the early pioneers of digital art laid the groundwork for today's virtual reality experiences, though they often remain uncredited for their contributions to what has become a global phenomenon in mainstream consciousness. This set of words perfectly captures how an idea can sort of seep into society, sometimes without its original source being widely recognized.
And that leads us directly to the modern concept he influenced so heavily: the abundance mindset.
Right. That's a very current term.
It is. An abundance mindset is a way of thinking that assumes there's more than enough for everyone, rather than seeing the world as having a limited quantity of resources or success.
The opposite of scarcity thinking.
Exactly. And this book, published way back in 1910, apparently laid the groundwork for what we now just call the abundance mindset.
It's a crucial link, isn't it? Connecting this century-old idea to a modern concept that's absolutely everywhere in personal development circles today. Like, adopting an abundance mindset helped her see opportunities instead of limitations in her career. It's a powerful mental shift.
And Wattles was truly innovative, apparently, in this kind of thinking for his time. Our next set of terms really highlights this innovation.
Okay.
We have ahead of his time, revolutionary, groundbreaking concepts, and cornerstone.
Wow, all very positive and impactful terms.
They are. To be ahead of his time means having ideas that are more advanced than what was common or accepted during that period. Revolutionary means involving complete or dramatic change, not just incremental.
Turning things upside down.
Pretty much. Groundbreaking concepts are ideas that are very new and fundamentally important, and a cornerstone is an essential, fundamental part of something larger.
The base upon which other things are built.
Right, so Wattles was genuinely ahead of his time, pushing these revolutionary ideas like the power of thoughts influencing reality. These are seen as groundbreaking concepts that have now become a cornerstone in a lot of modern psychology and self-help.
These terms together really convey how truly innovative and enduring his ideas are perceived to be. It's like saying Steve Jobs was often described as ahead of his time, introducing revolutionary products and groundbreaking concepts that became the cornerstone of modern technology. Wattles' work is presented as having a similar lasting impact in its domain.
And one of his most transformative ideas, related to the abundance mindset, directly challenges a very, very common economic view.
Ah, the way we think about resources.
Exactly. We're talking about the contrast between a fixed pie mentality and ideas like wealth being expansive, infinitely creatable, and not a zero-sum game.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack there. Fixed pie.
Yeah, fixed pie is an idiom. It suggests resources are limited, like there's only one pie, and if I take a bigger slice, you necessarily get a smaller one. One person's gain is automatically another's loss.
Got it. Very competitive view. And the others.
Expansive means covering a wide area or range. Extensive, not limited. Infinitely creatable means capable of being made or brought into existence endlessly. There's no inherent limit.
So the pie isn't fixed. We can bake more pies.
Kind of, yeah. And a zero-sum game is the technical term for that fixed pie situation. A situation where one side's gain equals the other side's loss. The total always sums to zero.
Okay. So Wattles rejected all of that.
Completely. He didn't see wealth as this fixed pie, but as expansive, constantly available, infinitely creatable, not zero-sum at all.
Wow. That is a profound shift in perspective, especially for 1910. It changes everything about competition and collaboration.
Think about it. Instead of viewing teamwork as a fixed pie where only one person can get credit, it's better to embrace an expansive mindset, recognizing that success is infinitely creatable and not a zero-sum game. It totally changes how you approach resource allocation, success, everything.
Your success doesn't have to mean my failure.
That's the core idea, and that view truly went against the grain of his time.
Another great idiom. Went against the grain.
It means to be contrary to the general or usual trend, to do things differently from what's expected or common. Wattles' view really went against the grain of a lot of the economic and social theories of his time.
Absolutely. It must have taken some courage to put that out there then. Like his decision to pursue a career in art rather than business went against the grain of his family's expectations. It signifies a deliberate departure from the norm, from established thought.
Because many theories back then, and even now sometimes, focused heavily on scarcity.
Scarcity. The opposite of abundance.
Right. Scarcity is the state of being scarce or in short supply, a shortage. The text notes, while lots of theories focused on scarcity, Wattles argued the universe is abundant.
That's the fundamental contrast right there. You know, the prolonged drought led to a scarcity of fresh water in the region. Scarcity thinking implies limitation, lack, boundaries. Wattles flips that entirely and presents a world of, well, endless possibility.
And he introduces a fascinating, maybe slightly strange concept to explain where this abundance comes from. Formless stuff.
Formless stuff. Okay, that sounds interesting.
It's a term he uses to describe the fundamental unformed substance, the sort of raw material of the universe from which all things, including wealth, are created. He says wealth is created from what he called formless stuff.
Huh. It sounds almost mystical, but you said he presents it practically.
He does. He links it to thought and action, but the concept itself, It's a bit abstract. Think of origin myths. In ancient myths, gods often created the world from a primeval, formless stuff before giving it shape and order. It suggests that wealth isn't just shuffled around, it's genuinely generated from some kind of universal source potential.
So it's not just a finite pot we're dipping into.
That's the implication. And this isn't just presented as a quirky metaphor. The text suggests it's a significant philosophical claim. Which brings us to our next phrase, deep metaphysical claim.
Metaphysical. Dealing with the fundamental nature of reality.
Exactly. A deep metaphysical claim is a profound assertion about the fundamental nature of reality and existence. Waddles' idea that wealth is generated from this formless stuff by thought is described as a pretty deep metaphysical claim about reality itself.
Right. Discussions about the nature of consciousness often involve deep metaphysical claims about how the mind relates to the body or the nature of time. This brings a really weighty philosophical dimension to what seems like a practical guide to getting rich.
It does. It's not just about practical steps. It's grounded in a specific view of how reality works. And if it's a science, as Waddles calls it, it must be predictable.
Following laws, repeatable steps.
Which leads to our next term, deterministic. Deterministic. This means believing that all events, including human actions, are ultimately determined by causes external to the will. It implies predictable outcomes if you know the causes and laws.
Like clockwork, almost.
Kind of. Waddles presents the process of getting rich as deterministic, almost like a universal law. If you do X and Y in a certain way, you will get Z.
Okay, that has huge implications for personal responsibility, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If the outcome is determined by applying the science correctly.
Exactly. It's like in some scientific theories, the behavior of particles is described as deterministic, meaning their future state can be predicted precisely if you know the initial conditions and forces. Waddle seems to apply a similar logic to personal success and wealth creation.
Which leads logically to where the responsibility lies.
Precisely. Our next phrase, shifts the responsibility entirely. This means changing where the blame or the credit lies completely, moving it from, say, external factors like luck or circumstances to personal application.
So it's all on you.
According to this view, yes. Waddle's view shifts the responsibility entirely, away from those external factors to whether you understand and apply the science correctly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful. And maybe a bit uncomfortable for some. It removes excuses. Like, the coach's new training regimen shifts the responsibility for fitness entirely to the individual players. It puts the onus squarely on the individual's actions and understanding.
It's a very strong position, especially for 1910, which is why our next phrase combines two important concepts: stark view and personal agency and accountability.
Stark view, meaning harsh or severe.
Yeah, a stark view is a harsh, severe, or maybe rigid opinion or perspective, uncompromising. And personal agency is the capacity individuals have to act independently and make their own free choices. Accountability is the fact or condition of being responsible for one's actions.
So, putting it together.
The text describes Waddle's philosophy as a very stark view on personal agency and accountability, especially for 1910, still challenging today.
It sounds like a very unfiltered perspective, one that really demands introspection from the reader. Like, the CEO presented a stark view of the company's financial situation, emphasizing that greater personal agency and accountability from all employees were needed for recovery. It highlights that direct, maybe uncomfortable link between individual choice, action, and the resulting outcome. No wiggle room.
So given all these challenging ideas and specific terms, our mission for this deep dive is really to unpack all of this.
Unpack. Another useful informal term.
Yeah, it's an informal idiom, meaning to analyze or explain something in detail, breaking it down into its components to understand it better. Our mission is to unpack all of this whole philosophy, using the vocabulary as our keys.
Precisely. Like, before making a decision, we need to unpack all of this data and understand its implications. It's about taking something complex like this philosophy and breaking it down piece by piece so it becomes clearer.
And a core piece of this philosophy, right at the beginning, can be described as a bombshell.
A bombshell. Like an explosion.
Metaphorically, yes. A bombshell is an unexpected and usually unpleasant surprise or a really shocking piece of news. Waddle's assertion that you must be rich for a complete life is introduced right away as a bombshell.
It certainly lands like one. Like, the announcement that the popular show was canceled came as a bombshell to its fans. It creates an immediate impact, that jolt of surprise, maybe even challenge or disbelief.
And that feeling it creates brings us to our next word. Confronting. Confronting. It means causing one to face an uncomfortable or difficult situation or truth directly.
Making you deal with something you might prefer to ignore.
Exactly. The idea that you must be rich for a complete life is described as confronting enough.
Yeah, it describes that feeling of being challenged, both emotionally and intellectually, like having to admit his mistakes was a confronting experience for the proud manager. It forces you to look squarely at something difficult.
And this philosophy truly rubs up against so many ingrained ideas about money, ambition, and morality. Okay, 3 parts here.
Let's take them one by one. Rubs up against.
It's an idiom meaning to come into contact or conflict with something, to be inconsistent with or cause friction with.
Okay, and ingrained ideas.
These are ideas or beliefs that are firmly fixed or established in someone's mind, often over a long period. Deeply rooted assumptions.
Things we take for granted. And morality.
That refers to principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong behavior, our sense of what's good or bad.
Got it. So putting it together.
Waddle's philosophy rubs up against so many ingrained ideas about money, ambition, morality. It creates friction with deeply held beliefs about what's right, what's proper, what the role of money should be.
That idiom, rubs up against, perfectly describes that friction, that sense of conflict when new ideas meet old, established ones. Like, his modern approach to education rubs up against many deeply ingrained ideas about traditional teaching methods, challenging the prevailing morality of the school system. It really highlights the discomfort that often comes with challenging norms.
So as we dig deeper now into part 3, we're tackling some really big questions prompted by this friction. Like, why on earth does he think wealth is the absolute foundation for human advancement?
Human advancement, okay.
Human advancement is the process of making progress or development in human society or capabilities, moving forward as a species, essentially.
Right. So he's framing the larger stakes of his argument here. Like, technological innovations are often seen as key drivers of human advancement. He's positioning wealth not just as something for personal gain, but somehow as a catalyst for broader human progress.
Which is a huge claim. Okay, that brings us right to the threshold of part 3, where Waddles introduces perhaps his most challenging ideas.
Oh.
The provocative concept of the sin of contentment and the need for full unfoldment. Let's explore the vocabulary that illuminates these really complex concepts.
All right, I'm ready. This sounds like it gets even more intense.
It does. Moving into part 3, let's first consider the consequences. What happens if you don't follow Waddle's science? Our next term is downside.
Downside, meaning the negative aspect.
Exactly. A downside is a disadvantage or negative aspect of something. The question is posed, what happens if you don't follow the science? Is there a downside?
It introduces that idea of consequences, of potential negative outcomes.
Yeah.
Like, while remote work offers flexibility, a potential downside is the lack of face-to-face interaction. It frames what might be lost or prevented if you don't pursue this path.
And this is where Waddles uses a phrase that's, well, it's truly provocative. Sin of contentment.
It's a sin of contentment.
Seriously, that's the phrase he uses. It refers, in his view, to the sin of being satisfied with less than your full potential, thereby resisting what he sees as the natural drive for growth. He literally calls it the sin of contentment.
Wow. Sin is such a loaded word. Contentment is usually seen as, a positive thing.
Yeah.
Finding peace with what you have.
Right. But Waddles flips it. He's not necessarily using sin in a strictly religious or moral sense here, but more rhetorically to emphasize what he sees as the profound cost of self-limitation, of settling.
It's a powerful choice of words. Like, maybe for some high achievers, being content with mediocrity can feel like a sin of contentment. It definitely grabs your attention and makes you question assumptions about being satisfied.
It does. So this whole deep dive, really, might prompt us to rethink our relationship with resources. Relationship with something means to reevaluate or change your understanding of how you interact with it or view it. So how we view resources, our own potential, that inherent ability for development, and what fulfillment, that sense of satisfaction or happiness, really means.
So this isn't just about vocabulary, it's potentially about shifting perspectives.
Exactly. Our aim is to maybe rethink our relationship with resources, with potential, and what fulfillment really means, using Waddle's ideas as a catalyst.
It's like a call to action for the listener, isn't it?
Yeah.
The environmental crisis has forced us to rethink our relationship with natural resources and consider the long-term potential for sustainable living, leading to a new sense of fulfillment. It's about a deeper engagement with these core concepts.
And as we heard earlier, Waddles is quite absolute about wealth's necessity for this fulfillment. He frames it as non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable, meaning no exceptions.
Pretty much. Non-negotiable means not open to discussion or modification. Absolutely essential. In his view, wealth is non-negotiable for a complete life. Full stop.
That word conveys such absolute certainty, doesn't it? Like, for the health and safety of the team, adhering to these rules is non-negotiable. It leaves absolutely no room for debate or compromise in his framework.
And his statements matching that certainty are not presented as gentle suggestions. Our next phrase combines two concepts: incredibly blunt and a declaration, not an observation.
Blunt means very direct, right? Maybe even harsh.
Yes, to be incredibly blunt means to be very direct and unambiguous in speech, sometimes even to the point of sounding impolite. And a declaration is a formal or explicit statement or announcement, much stronger than an observation, which is merely a remark or comment.
So he's not just commenting on how things look, he's stating how they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Waddle's core quote about needing to be rich is described as incredibly blunt and, significantly, a declaration, not an observation.
It highlights that difference. Yeah, the difference between just stating a fact you've noticed and making this bold, authoritative claim. Like, his feedback was incredibly blunt. Not just an observation, but a declaration that immediate changes were needed. It emphasizes the sheer forcefulness of his assertion.
Now, when you first hear such a blunt declaration, it might feel, well, uncharitable.
Uncharitable, meaning unkind.
Yeah, unkind or unsympathetic, but the analysis suggests he's not actually making a moral judgment. A moral judgment is an evaluation of the rightness or wrongness of an action or a person's character.
So he's not saying poor people are bad people.
Apparently not. The text suggests that while the initial reaction to Waddle's statement might feel uncharitable, he's not making a moral judgment about people's character or worth.
Okay, that's an important distinction. It separates his, let's say, pragmatic view from actual character assassination. Like, making an uncharitable comment about someone's appearance is a clear moral judgment that can be hurtful. Waddles, by contrast, seems to be focusing solely on what is practically required for optimal living, regardless of someone's inherent worth.
Indeed. His perspective is described as purely practical, almost utilitarian.
Utilitarian, focusing on usefulness.
Exactly. Purely practical means concerned with the actual doing or use of something, rather than with theory and abstract ideas. Realistic. And utilitarian here implies a focus on practical outcomes, on what works, on usefulness, rather than perhaps aesthetics or sentiment. Waddle's perspective is framed as purely practical, almost utilitarian.
It emphasizes that focus on function and enabling capability over abstract ideals or feelings. Like, his advice on fixing the broken car was purely practical, focusing on the utilitarian aspects rather than theoretical engineering principles. It's about what works and what enables the desired outcome, in Waddle's case, a full life.
And what wealth enables, in his view, is the fullest possible expression of oneself. Our next phrases are quite evocative. Unfold your soul and develop your unique talents to their absolute maximum.
Unfold your soul. That's beautiful imagery.
Isn't it? These are metaphorical expressions. Unfold your soul suggests developing one's spiritual and inner self to its fullest. And develop your unique talents to their absolute maximum means fully realizing and using all your innate abilities. The argument is, for this full personal growth, to unfold your soul and develop your unique talents to their absolute maximum, you need many things to use. You need resources.
These phrases really evoke this beautiful, expansive imagery of complete personal actualization. Like traveling and experiencing new cultures can truly help you unfold your soul, pushing you to develop your unique talents to their absolute maximum. It paints a picture of becoming everything you possibly can be.
But it's crucial to clarify what he doesn't mean by needing resources. The text emphasizes it's not just hoarding stuff, and it's not about materialism for its own sake.
Okay, important clarification. What do those mean exactly?
Well, hoarding stuff means accumulating a large amount of something, often valuable, maybe in a hidden or guarded way, just for the sake of having it. And materialism for its own sake is that belief that material possessions are the most important thing, valued purely for the accumulation itself, rather than what they enable.
So it's not about dragon sickness piling up gold.
Exactly. This distinction is crucial to understanding his point. Like, he wasn't interested in hoarding stuff. He opposed materialism for its own sake, preferring to invest in experiences rather than possessions. Waddles is apparently talking about purpose-driven wealth. Wealth as a tool, not mere accumulation for its own sake.
Wealth is a means, not the end goal itself.
That seems to be it. So wealth provides resources for growth, like experiences that broaden your horizons.
Broaden your horizons. Another useful idiom.
Yeah, means to expand one's range of interests, experiences, and knowledge. Wealth allows for experiences like travel that really broaden your horizons.
It's a common phrase, but quite powerful when you think about it in terms of personal growth. Learning a new language is a great way to broaden your horizons and understand different cultures. It highlights how new experiences, often enabled by resources, enrich your life and understanding.
And wealth also provides crucial internal resources, according to this view. Our next set of terms is really interesting. Mental space, grinding worry, and the idea that time is a luxury.
Mental space. Like room to think.
Exactly. Mental space is that psychological capacity for thinking, planning, creative work, and general mental well-being, free from excessive stress or distraction.
And grinding worry. That sounds awful.
It does. It means continuous, oppressive, and exhausting state of anxiety or concern, often about basic needs like money. And the phrase, time is a luxury, means having free, unstructured time is desirable, but often very difficult to obtain, especially under financial pressure.
So the connection is?
Wealth provides the mental space, freedom from that constant grinding worry, the time to actually think, create, rest. The text concludes, time is a luxury. Poverty often steals.
Wow. That really highlights the unseen costs of poverty, doesn't it? The impact on your inner world, your ability to even think clearly. After the project deadline, I finally had the mental space to relax without the constant grinding worry, realizing that time is truly a luxury I don't often have. It underscores how financial security can free the mind for higher pursuits, for that unfoldment.
And these resources, time, mental space, experiences, they're framed as enablers of growth and expression.
Enablers, things that make something possible.
Right. Enablers of growth and expression are things that make it possible for personal growth and the communication or demonstration of your thoughts, feelings, and talents to actually happen. And conversely, poverty puts practical limits on your ability to develop.
Practical limits, like real-world barriers.
Exactly. Practical limits are restrictions or boundaries imposed by real-world circumstances or feasibility. Lack of money creates concrete limitations.
This really emphasizes the supportive, maybe even necessary, role of resources. Funding for art programs are vital enablers of growth and expression for young students, overcoming the practical limits that a lack of resources might impose. Without these enablers, potential can just remain untapped, stuck.
And what happens if that potential isn't fueled? If it remains untapped? Our next words describe this state. Fuel stays locked and doesn't get realized.
Okay, so fuel here means to supply energy for growth.
Yes. To fuel something like deep personal growth means to supply it with the material or the impetus it needs to develop. Resources genuinely fuel deep personal growth, but without that fuel,
It stays locked. like behind a door.
Exactly. When potential stays locked, it remains unable to be used or accessed. It's there, but you can't get to it, and therefore it doesn't get realized.
Meaning it doesn't become real or actual, it stays just as potential.
Precisely. It remains as a possibility rather than a reality. The text states potential often stays locked without money and doesn't get realized.
That points to a really tragic outcome, doesn't it? The waste of unfulfilled potential. Like, without dedicated study, a student's full academic potential might stay locked, never truly getting realized, even if they have the talent to fuel deep personal growth. Money, in this view, provides the practical key to unlock that potential.
And Waddell's view on this is very direct, very pragmatic. We encountered this word before.
Pragmatic, focused on practical results.
Yes, dealing with things sensibly and realistically based on practical considerations rather than theory. The view is also described as almost stark, harsh, severe, and stripped of sentimentality.
Stripped of sentimentality, meaning no warm fuzzies.
Pretty much. Stripped of sentimentality means without excessive tenderness or nostalgia, approached in a cold, hard, realistic way.
Okay, so it's a very direct, unsentimental look at the practical realities of potential and resources. Her approach to the budget crisis was pragmatic and stripped of sentimentality, focusing only on the most effective solutions. He's focused purely on observable facts and outcomes, it seems.
And importantly, he doesn't just mean having enough to, scrape by.
Scrape by, like just barely survive.
Yeah, to scrape by means to manage to live with great difficulty, usually because you have very little money. Waddell's doesn't just mean having enough to scrape by. In fact, he actively pushes back against just being content with that.
Pushes back against, meaning resists or opposes.
Exactly. He resists the idea of settling for mere sufficiency.
So he's rejecting that idea of just getting by. Even though she managed to scrape by on a tight budget, she pushed back against the idea that she should be content with so little. He wants full expansion, full expression, not just survival.
Which is why he gives us his definition of true riches, and it's quite something. He defines it as having all that one wants for the living of all the life one is capable of living.
All the life one is capable of living.
Wow!
That's huge.
It is. So true riches is Waddell's concept of wealth, encompassing everything needed resources, experiences, opportunities for the full realization of one's talents, capabilities, and potential across all aspects of life.
That is a massively expansive definition of wealth, much more than just money. For the artist, true riches meant having the freedom and resources to create, allowing her to live all the life she was capable of living through her art. It's about being, doing, and having everything necessary for complete self-expression and fulfillment.
And he doesn't shy away from this ambitious idea. The text says he truly doubles down on it.
Doubles down, like in blackjack.
Sort of. It's an idiom that means to strengthen one's commitment to a particular strategy or opinion, often in the face of opposition or risk. Waddell's doubles down on his assertion that being rich isn't about being satisfied or contented with a little. He insists on the all.
Got it. It shows intensified commitment to his point. After facing initial resistance, the team decided to double down on their innovative marketing strategy. He's not backing off. He's reiterating his point with even more force.
And this stance, this definition, it directly challenges that whole virtue of modesty.
Challenges the virtue of modesty.
Yeah.
But wanting all isn't very modest, is it?
Not at all. To challenge that whole virtue of modesty means to directly oppose the traditional idea that humility and simplicity are desirable moral qualities. And the phrase, all the life one is capable of living, sets a high bar.
A high bar, meaning a difficult standard.
Exactly. A high bar is a difficult or challenging standard to meet. It's not asking for something easy.
This really highlights the clash with traditional values, doesn't it? Modesty, contentment with little. Waddell's seems to reject them. His ambitious goal to learn 5 languages by next year challenges the whole virtue of modesty for many, setting an incredibly high bar for himself. Waddell's isn't asking for small improvements. He's demanding a complete transformation toward maximum potential.
And this vision is about unleashing every single talent, every capability you possess, fully.
Unleashing, like setting free.
Yes, To unleash every single talent, every capability means releasing and allowing every innate ability you have to be used to its absolute full extent. No holding back. And this idea, it fundamentally reframes wealth.
Fundamentally reframes, changes the whole meaning.
Completely. To fundamentally reframe wealth means to change the basic way we understand or perceive it. It's no longer just about money. It's presented as a measure of self-actualization and fulfillment.
Ah, self-actualization.
Yeah.
That's Maslow territory, realizing your potential. And fulfillment, that sense of deep satisfaction.
Exactly. Self-actualization is the realization or fulfillment of one's talents and potentialities. And fulfillment is the achievement of something desired, leading to satisfaction or happiness. Wealth becomes the tool for reaching these states.
It's a truly grand vision for personal development, isn't it?
Yeah.
The mentorship program aimed at unleashing every single talent and every capability of young entrepreneurs, fundamentally reframing their understanding of wealth as a tool for self-actualization and fulfillment. It turns wealth from a potentially problematic thing into the very means to become your best self.
Because according to this view, without those necessary resources, that potential just sits there, dormant, unexpressed.
Experiment, like a sleeping volcano.
Good analogy. Dormant means inactive, as if in sleep. And unexpressed simply means not made clear or shown, not brought out into the world.
This really evokes the sadness of that unfulfilled potential we talked about. Many people have dormant talents that remain unexpressed throughout their lives due to lack of opportunity or encouragement. Waddell seems to view this state of dormancy as a profound loss, something to be actively avoided.
So wealth, in his definition, means having the tangible material resources.
Tangible things you can touch, real stuff.
Right. Having those resources that enable that full spectrum life.
Full spectrum life,
Yeah.
covering everything.
Yes, a full spectrum life is a life that encompasses the complete range of possible experiences, emotions, and developments. Wealth provides the resources that enable this, removing the barriers so your highest self can actually show up in the world, whatever that looks like for you. It's about liberating your gifts.
Liberating your gifts.
Yeah.
Setting your talents free.
Exactly. To liberate your gifts means setting free or enabling your innate talents and abilities to flourish.
This makes that practical link between money and freedom very, very clear. Having access to tangible material resources allowed the artist to live a full spectrum life, completely liberating her gifts and enabling her to create without financial constraint. It's about removing the practical obstacles that prevent your true self from emerging.
And this is why, in his somewhat harsh view, being content with less than you're capable of means you are actively choosing to hold back your own growth. You're failing to express your full potential.
Wow. Actively choosing to hold back. That sounds like a deliberate act of self-sabotage.
That's how he frames it. To be actively choosing to hold back means deliberately deciding to restrain or prevent yourself from progressing. And failing to express your full potential means simply not succeeding in using or showing all of your inherent abilities.
That's his harsh judgment against inaction, against contentment. By not seeking new challenges, he was actively choosing to hold back his own growth, effectively failing to express his full potential in his career. He sees settling as a deliberate choice against growth.
And this ties into a larger, almost cosmic perspective he holds. He sees nature itself as being all about the constant advancement and unfoldment of life.
Unfoldment of life. Like a flower opening.
Beautiful image, yes. The unfoldment of life is that continuous process of development, growth, and realization of inherent possibilities in all of existence. So to deliberately choose limitation is seen as resisting the natural flow of existence.
Going against the current of the universe, so to speak.
That's the idea. To resist the natural flow of existence means opposing the inherent direction or movement of life and its development towards more complexity and expression. This leads to what the analysis calls a very cosmic perspective on personal responsibility.
Cosmic perspective,
Right.
meaning seeing your life in the context of the entire universe.
Right. A cosmic perspective on personal responsibility means viewing your individual accountability for growth not just in personal terms, but within the context of a larger universal order or purpose. Your growth contributes to the universe's growth.
That's a very grand framework. So the individual's growth becomes part of this larger purpose. Embracing change rather than resisting the natural flow of existence is crucial for the unfoldment of life. It's a cosmic perspective on personal responsibility where your growth contributes to the larger universe.
Exactly. Because, from this perspective, to stunt your own growth is, in a way, to work against that larger natural drive for expansion.
Stunt your growth. Prevent it from reaching full size.
Yes. To stunt your own growth means to prevent or hinder your own progress or development.
It emphasizes the negative consequence of stagnation again. Neglecting to learn new skills can stunt your own growth in a rapidly changing industry.
Yeah.
He frames self-limitation not just as a personal loss, but as actively harmful, maybe even unnatural.
And here's where Wattles makes, according to the analysis, another massive leap.
Massive leap, a huge jump in logic or coin.
Yes, a massive leap is a very large or significant advance or change, maybe one that's hard to follow initially. He starts talking about wealth not just as desirable or necessary, but as an actual inalienable right like life and liberty.
An inalienable right, like in the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
Something that cannot be taken away.
Exactly. An inalienable right is a right considered fundamental, one that cannot be taken away or transferred to another person. The question then becomes, how does he even justify elevating getting rich to the status of a fundamental human right?
Justify elevating. Provide a reason for giving it such high status.
Right. To justify elevating means to provide a reason or explanation for considering something to be of a higher status or importance than usually assumed.
That highlights the sheer audacity of his claim, doesn't it? The civil rights movement made a massive leap forward by asserting that voting is an inalienable right, and leaders worked to justify elevating this principle in public consciousness. Wattles is applying this incredibly powerful concept of inalienable rights to personal wealth. How does he justify that?
He connects it directly to the right to life itself, but specifically to the right to live fully. He defines the right to be rich as the freedom to use all things necessary for complete mental, spiritual, and physical unfoldment.
So the right isn't just to have money, but the freedom to use whatever is necessary for that total unfoldment.
That seems to be the key distinction. It's the liberty and the means to access everything required for the full development of your mind, your spirit, and your body.
That's a truly expansive scope for unfoldment.
Right.
It covers everything. Like, you could argue a fully funded public library system provides the freedom to use all things necessary for complete mental, spiritual, and physical unfoldment for everyone in the community. It's about having access to the tools needed for a holistic, fully realized life.
So if you lack the means, if you lack that access, your right to this complete life is, in his view, effectively denied.
Effectively denied, meaning maybe not officially denied, but in practice, it's impossible.
Exactly. To be effectively denied means, in practice, though not necessarily officially refused or withheld. You might technically have the right to flourish, but without the means, it's meaningless.
Okay.
And this leads into exactly. To be effectively denied means, in practice, though not necessarily officially refused or withheld. You might technically have the right to flourish, but without the means, it's meaningless.
Okay.
And this leads into an interesting philosophical distinction the analysis brings up. The difference between negative versus positive rights. He's definitely arguing for a positive right here, which includes an entitlement to things.
Okay, negative versus positive rights. Negative rights are usually freedom from interference, right? Like freedom of speech, the government can't stop you. Positive rights are freedom to something, implying someone else has to provide it, like a right to health care.
That's a good summary. Negative rights protect from interference, while positive rights obligate the provision of goods or services. Entitlement to things is the belief that one has a right to receive something. And the analysis points out, usually rights are about protection from things, not entitlement to things, right? Negative versus positive rights. He's definitely arguing for a positive right, a right to have the necessary means provided or at least available.
That's a significant philosophical stance. While citizens have a negative right to free speech, some argue for a positive right to education, claiming that without it, opportunity is effectively denied, creating an uneven entitlement to things. Wattles is essentially arguing that the universe, or the formless stuff, owes you the means to fully express yourself, and it's your right to claim them.
And this is where we get to what the analysis calls the really countercultural part. The idea that wanting to get rich, pursuing this right, is actually praiseworthy.
Countercultural, going against the dominant culture's values.
Yes, a countercultural part is a part that goes against the prevailing social norms or values. He flips the usual script again.
Flips the usual script. Reverses expectations.
Exactly, an idiom meaning to reverse the typical or expected situation. He flips the script by arguing that pursuing wealth is praiseworthy, not mere greed.
Mere greed, meaning just simple, uncomplicated, excessive desire for money. Nothing more noble.
Right. Mere greed implies it's just base desire. Wattles argues it's something else entirely.
This is a really surprising reversal of traditional views, where wanting wealth is often seen as suspicious at best, sinful at worst. Her business model, which prioritized environmental impact over profit, was a countercultural part of the industry, truly flipping the usual script of focusing on mere greed. Wattles provides a completely different, almost noble motivation for seeking wealth.
Instead of greed, he sees it as the desire for a richer, fuller, and more abundant life.
Richer, fuller, abundant. Those words sound very positive.
They do. This phrase describes a life characterized by greater variety, depth, and an ample supply of resources and experiences. Not just more stuff, but more life.
This reinforces that quality over quantity distinction we talked about.
Yeah.
He sought experiences that promised a richer, fuller, and more abundant life, not just material possessions. It's about the depth and breadth and quality of life, not just accumulation.
And this idea, an abundant life, not just more stuff, feels like a crucial difference.
Crucial difference, a very important distinction.
Yes, a crucial difference is a distinction that is extremely important or significant. It changes the whole meaning.
It really does highlight how a subtle shift in wording from more stuff to abundant life can signal a major distinction in meaning and intent. Understanding the cultural nuances is a crucial difference between a good translation and a truly great one. This distinction reframes the entire goal of seeking wealth.
And Wattles posits that pursuing this abundant life enabled by wealth actually makes one more contributory.
More contributory. Able to give more back.
Yes, more contributory means more able or inclined to give something, to help achieve a common goal or purpose. He argues this longing for more life.
Longing. A deep desire.
The strong, yearning desire, yes. This longing is inherent in human nature.
Inherent, meaning it's a fundamental part of us.
Existing in someone as a permanent, essential, or characteristic attribute, he sees it as a fundamental impulse.
A basic drive.
A basic instinctive drive or urge to realize what's possible within you.
To fulfill your potential. Okay, putting that together.
He argues that the desire for a richer life isn't selfish greed, but a deep-seated positive motivation. It's inherent, a fundamental impulse to realize your potential, which in turn makes you more able to contribute to others.
That connects personal desire directly to broader societal benefit. The longing to create, inherent in human nature, is a fundamental impulse that drives artists to realize what's possible within them and become more contributory to society. It paints the desire for more in a very positive light.
He even goes so far as to say that not desiring more life, being content with limitation, is actually abnormal, a deviation.
Abnormal. Deviation for being content. Wow.
I know. Abnormal means deviating from what is normal or typical, and in Wattles' view, not desiring more life is abnormal. A deviation is the action of departing from an established course or accepted standard. He sees the standard as growth.
That is a shocking use of those terms for something like contentment. His extreme punctuality was considered abnormal by his laid-back colleagues, a noticeable deviation from their usual relaxed approach. Wattles uses these words, usually reserved for negative things, to underscore his absolute belief in a universal, natural drive for growth and more life. Settling is presented as going against nature.
And he describes what true wealth enables in very grand terms, contributing to the power, elegance, beauty, and richness of life.
Power, elegance, beauty, richness. That's a very appealing vision.
It is. It's this multifaceted vision of life lived at its peak, fully equipped and expressed, going far beyond mere material acquisition. This perspective totally elevates it beyond just bank statements.
Elevates it beyond, raises it above the mundane.
Exactly. To elevate it beyond means to raise the status or importance of something above a certain, perhaps lower or more common level.
This presents a really aspirational and holistic vision of what true wealth is for. A true masterpiece elevates art beyond mere decoration, revealing the power, elegance, beauty, and richness of life itself. It's about the quality and depth of existence enabled by resources, not just the resources themselves.
And crucially, Wattles connects seeking wealth directly to personal growth, collective improvement, a kind of aesthetic, impactful way of living, not just personal gain. Okay, lots of terms there.
Let's break it down. Seeking wealth is obvious. Collective improvement.
Progress or enhancement that benefits the group or society as a whole. Aesthetic.
Concerned with beauty or the appreciation of beauty. An impactful way of living.
A manner of living that has a strong positive effect on people or things. Personal gain.
This benefit to oneself. Okay. And the last part.
This connection reframes the whole conversation. To reframe the whole conversation means to change the perspective or context of the entire discussion about wealth.
So, he argues that seeking wealth isn't just for you, but leads to societal benefit, a more beautiful and impactful life, completely changing how we should talk about it.
That's the idea. It shifts the focus dramatically from pure self-interest to a much broader impact. His nonprofit approach to seeking wealth was driven by a desire for collective improvement, fostering an aesthetic and impactful way of living that went beyond mere personal gain, effectively reframing the whole conversation about success.
It ties personal ambition directly to positive outward effects.
He argues that true life needs all parts of you, body, mind, and soul, to be unhindered.
Unhindered. Meaning free, unobstructed.
Yes, not obstructed or impeded, free to develop fully.
That sounds like the ideal state for growth. With the path clear, the river flowed unhindered to the sea.
Yeah.
It's about removing all obstacles to full expression and function.
And Wattles then explains specifically how poverty hinders these aspects of life, starting with physical well-being. Obviously, poverty impacts physical well-being, the state of being healthy and free from illness.
The stress, the lack of resources for health.
Exactly, leading to the sheer physical drain of constant financial struggle. Sheer physical drain means that extreme, absolute exhaustion of physical energy. Constant financial struggle is that continuous, difficult effort just to manage money and make ends meet.
It consumes all your energy.
Right, and he argues this makes it hard to ponder philosophy, to think deeply about fundamental truth, or have dedicated time set aside specifically for a purpose to actually study and absorb it all, to take in information thoroughly. Why? Because of that gnawing money worry.
Gnawing, like constantly eating away at you.
Yes, a gnawing money worry is a persistent, troubling, and eroding concern about financial matters. It never leaves you. And ultimately, for the impoverished, time is a luxury. We heard that before, but it bears repeating.
This really highlights the tangible, physical, and mental effects of poverty. Despite his passion to ponder philosophy, the sheer physical drain of his constant financial struggle left him with no dedicated time to absorb it all, highlighting how time is a luxury he couldn't afford due to gnawing money worry. Poverty consumes those precious mental and physical resources needed for higher development.
And it's not just about what you can afford to buy or read. He argues a full mental life needs the whole intellectual environment.
Intellectual environment.
Yes.
The surroundings that stimulate thought.
Yes. The surroundings or conditions that influence a person's intellectual development and activity. including things like stimulating conversations. Stimulating conversations are discussions that are interesting and encourage new ideas or thoughts.
Things that challenge you and make you grow mentally.
Right. But without means, your mental world gets kind of constricted by necessity.
Constricted by necessity.
Yeah.
Meaning limited because you have to focus on survival.
Exactly. Limited or confined due to unavoidable circumstances or requirements. This, he says, limits full mental unfoldment. Full mental unfoldment being the complete development and expression of your intellectual capacities.
So poverty creates these unseen barriers to mental growth too.
Yeah.
A rich intellectual environment with stimulating conversations is essential for full mental unfoldment. Without it, minds can feel constricted by necessity, lacking the broader perspectives needed for growth. Wealth, in this context, provides access not just to things, but to this enriching environment and the freedom to engage with it.
Now, okay, connecting material money to the soul.
Hmm.
That feels like the biggest jump, maybe. How does physical wealth connect to the soul, which feels so immaterial?
Immaterial, not physical, having no substance. Yeah, that's the challenge.
Right. This is where Waddell's philosophy apparently gets really profound, meaning very great or intense, showing deep insight, and directly tackles that idea that spirituality means detachment from the material.
Detachment from the material. The idea that being spiritual means not caring about worldly things.
Exactly. A state of not being influenced or affected by physical possessions or worldly concerns. Waddell's confessed this directly, and his argument is described as stunningly simple and direct.
Stunningly simple and direct. Remarkably easy to understand and straightforward. Okay, I'm intrigued. How does he connect money and the soul?
This challenges a very common spiritual belief, doesn't it? While many philosophers debate the immaterial nature of the soul, Waddell's offered a profound argument that challenged traditional detachment from the material, presenting his ideas in a stunningly simple and direct way. He tries to bridge that gap.
So what's the bridge?
His core argument for the soul's connection to wealth is truly impactful and maybe heartbreaking, he argues. Love is denied expression by poverty.
Wow. Love is denied expression by poverty. That hits hard.
It does. It means the ability to effectively show love, to act on it, is hindered or prevented by a lack of financial resources. He states that man's highest happiness is found in the bestowal of benefits on those he loves.
The bestowal of benefits, the act of giving good things.
Yes, the act of giving or presenting advantages or good things. He argues love finds its most natural and fulfilling practical expression in giving, things, opportunities, help.
So if you can't give, you can't fully express love.
That's the implication, which makes wealth, the ability to give, almost altruistic.
Altruistic.
Yeah.
Selfless concern for others. That flips the greed idea again.
Completely. To be altruistic means showing a disinterested and selfless concern for the well-being of others. Unselfish. He then speaks of the inverse, the agony of not being able to provide.
Agony. Extreme suffering.
Yes, extreme physical or mental suffering caused by the inability to supply what is needed or desired for loved ones.
This really highlights the heartbreaking emotional impact of poverty on our deepest connections. For a parent, true love is denied expression by poverty when they experience the agony of not being able to provide for their child. The bestowal of benefits through tangible actions, however small, demonstrates a powerful altruistic drive. Wealth, therefore, enables love to be shown in practical, tangible, impactful ways.
And this desire to contribute, to give, gets stifled without resources.
It's stifled, choked off, prevented from developing.
Exactly. If you have nothing to give, Waddell argues quite bluntly, you cannot fill your place as a husband or father, as a citizen.
Cannot fill your place. Unable to perform your role properly.
Yes. Unable to perform one's role or function effectively in relation to others. This, the analysis says, is an often overlooked point.
Overlooked point. Something important we don't usually consider.
Right. An often overlooked point is a point that is not noticed or considered. Wealth, therefore, lets you fully live out the generous, loving, and contributing part of your nature.
Live out. Experience fully, put into practice.
Yes, to live out means to experience or put into practice something throughout one's life.
This reveals the societal impact of individual lack, doesn't it? It's not just about personal frustration. When a community leader's ideas get stifled by a lack of resources, they cannot fully fill their place in society, which is an often overlooked point. True wealth allows them to live out the generous, loving, contributing part of their nature. It connects personal wealth directly to fulfilling your role in the community and expressing your best self.
So in this view, wealth redefines philanthropy almost as a necessary outcome of real wealth.
Redefines philanthropy,
Yeah.
changes the meaning of charitable giving,
Yeah.
and necessary outcome,
Right.
meaning it naturally follows.
Yes. To redefine philanthropy means to change the established meaning or definition of the desire to promote the welfare of others, typically through generous donations. A necessary outcome is an unavoidable or essential result. The analysis calls this a surprisingly profound twist.
Profound twist. A significant and unexpected change in perspective.
Exactly. It turns self-interest inside out.
It turns self-interest inside out, makes acting for yourself actually serve others.
That's the idea. To turn self-interest inside out means to reverse the usual understanding of self-interest, making it seem that acting in one's own best interest, achieving wealth for full unfoldment, naturally leads to benefiting others through giving. Wealth helps one authentically unfolds his soul.
Authentically unfolds his soul. Genuinely develops and expresses one's deepest inner self. Okay?
So the argument ties it all together. Seeking wealth for your own full expression naturally leads to generosity and contribution.
That is an unexpected connection between personal wealth and societal good. Waddell's philosophy redefines philanthropy as a necessary outcome of truly abundant living, a profound twist that turns self-interest inside out, demonstrating how material success can help one authentically unfold their soul through giving. It's a truly transformative perspective, completely flipping the usual narrative.
We've truly plunged into some deep and challenging vocabulary today, haven't we? Exploring how these words take on new, sometimes startling dimensions within Waddell's radical philosophy. Each term really is a key to unlocking another layer of his argument for this life of abundance.
Definitely. It shows how language shapes our understanding of complex ideas.
Right. Now, in our final part 4, let's look at what he considers the ultimate duty related to all this, and the profound paradigm shift his philosophy demands.
Okay, the culmination of the argument. Let's hear it.
So we've put all those pieces together. The necessity of wealth, the praise for desiring it, its role as the foundation for body, mind, and soul, even its connection to expressing love and contributing. Now, for part 4, Waddell's delivers what might be his most provocative statement of all.
More provocative than sin of contentment or the right to be rich?
Possibly.
Right.
He concludes that neglecting the study of this science of getting rich is nothing less than a dereliction of duty.
Neglecting the study, just failing to learn about it. And dereliction of duty. That sounds serious, like a soldier abandoning their post.
Exactly. To neglect the study is to fail to give proper care or attention to learning something. And dereliction of duty is the shameful failure to fulfill one's obligations, a very strong condemnation.
That is an incredibly intense claim. To frame not learning how to get rich as a dereliction of duty, a serious moral or societal failing. He presents learning this as a critical opportunity then.
Yes, a critical opportunity, a moment or situation that is extremely important for a decision or action, one you shouldn't miss. And this final claim, it ties it all together.
Ties it all together.
Right.
Connects all the previous points into a coherent whole.
Precisely. He argues that this dereliction of duty stems from the fundamental responsibility each person has to maximize your potential.
Maximize your potential. Make the absolute most of your abilities.
Yes, to maximize your potential is to make the greatest possible use of one's abilities or capacities. Since wealth is presented as the necessary means for this, failing to learn how to acquire it is failing in your duty to maximize yourself. His overall proposition is described as a genuine paradigm shift.
Paradigm shift. A fundamental change in basic concepts and practices, like Copernicus changing how we saw the solar system.
Exactly that level of fundamental change in thinking. A paradigm shift is a fundamental change in approach or underlying assumptions. And this shift demands a serious reevaluation of our whole relationship with wealth, ambition, morality, Everything.
Demands a serious reevaluation, requires a thorough and careful reconsideration.
Yes. It forces us to rethink the relationship between personal prosperity, being successful and well off yourself, and generosity, or the well-being of others, the health, happiness, and comfort of other people.
That connection was surprising earlier, how he linked them.
It was. The analysis notes it powerfully links the two, strongly connects personal success and contributing to others. This means the usual ways we think about money, morality, self-interest, it's all turned on its head.
All turned on its head. Completely reversed or contradicted.
Yes, this perspective truly reframes wealth completely, changing the entire context of the discussion. Wealth is presented not as an end, not as greed, but as the essential means for unfoldment.
Essential means for unfoldment. The crucial methods or resources needed for that full development and expression we've been talking about.
Exactly.
So to sum up his view, to maximize your potential, which is your duty, and thus contribute to the well-being of others, often demands this serious reevaluation of traditional views on personal prosperity. It creates a paradigm shift that powerfully links personal success and contribution, effectively turning old assumptions about greed and morality on their head by presenting wealth purely as an essential means for unfoldment. It's challenging, but it is a coherent argument within its own framework.
What a deep dive this has been. Seriously, we've plunged into some really profound vocabulary today, haven't we? Exploring how words like startling, unfoldment, pragmatic, and that final dereliction of duty take on these intense new dimensions when placed within Waddell's radical philosophy.
Each turn we've explored really has been like a key unlocking a different layer of his argument for this life of abundance he envisions.
And understanding these words, these specific nuances, it isn't just about, passing an English test or something. It's really about giving you the linguistic tools to grasp and maybe even discuss these complex, challenging ideas that might just reconfigure some of your own ingrained ideas about success, potential, and maybe even duty.
Absolutely. These terms equip you to engage with sophisticated concepts, whether you agree with them or not, with much greater clarity and depth. It's about understanding the landscape of ideas.
Which leaves us, and leaves you, our listener, with a pretty provocative thought to maybe sit with for a while. If, as Waddell suggests, every desire you feel for a richer, fuller life is actually an inherent human impulse, maybe even a universal human push, well then what possibilities are you truly capable of unleashing if you allowed yourself to pursue all that's necessary for your complete mental, spiritual, and physical unfoldment?
It's definitely a question that could shift how you look at your own ambitions, your potential, and what fulfillment really means to you. Something to ponder. We look forward to the next deep dive.